thought, okay, maybe Jane Eyre. And so you like Jane Eyre. And then you asked me to read The Lord of the Rings, which I had read when I was, I think, in grade 9, but it was a long time ago. So anyway, I read some of it and then we read it together out loud. So yeah, so it does have a special place in my heart. And my sister got The Hobbit when she was in grade 7 for a Christmas present from my parents, and then we read it all together as a family. So it does mean something to me, even though I'm a Canadian lit and realist specialist and women's writing. So anyway, but anyway, this particular story, Ina Lindley, I did with some faith and culture classes in Bible colleges. And the students at first wondered what I was thinking in choosing this story, but it's, for one thing, 7 pages long, so we can actually dig into it in one day. And it is from the Silmarillion, which Tim has the larger book. It's a collection of writings that Tolkien's son actually gathered after his father had passed away. And the story is that his father had been working on these stories and poems and essays. It's a mixture of things as the backstory, and sort of, he said it was a fantastic history or fictitious history of Middle Earth and what he thought of as the world of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So it wasn't absolutely consistent because it kept developing over time, and his father had never published it, but he had some, I guess, intention of publishing it at some point. And so his son gathered the material, and it was quite a labor of love. I understand from the introduction that he put this together, and it gives us the background to, the stories of elves and of men and, the time and place and all of that and the struggles. So the Silmarillion is a short story that is at the beginning of all of that, and it's a retelling of the creation story. So for a long time, I didn't quite understand what Tolkien was getting at. I was expecting something like Pilgrim's Progress, like a allegory where I'd think, oh, I just have to figure out what things stand for, and then I'll know what he's talking about, and it'll be biblical. But it's not quite like that. It's more from the mind of someone who was a historian of language, a philologist, and someone who studied Old English and Middle English. Middle English is actually Shakespeare. Old English is more like Anglo-Saxon. So something that is not even necessarily recognizable to English speakers today. So he had this huge background and understanding, and he was very interested in the development of language and of even Norse mythology and stories and legends. And so this came from his great imagination of putting these things together and creating a kind of mythical world. But he does have an interest too in the biblical roots of creation. So that's perhaps the way to look at it when we come at it today. Good morning. So anyway, the Silmarillion that this story comes from also includes some of the characters you might know from The Lord of the Rings, like Elrond, the King of the Elves, and Galadriel, and there's even a section called of the Rings of Power, so that might ring a bell. So anyway, there are things that are worth reading, and I haven't read the whole thing. I think maybe Tim's read more, but I do quite like the creation retelling. So I think what I'll do is I'll get Tim to read it because he has much better pronunciation and understanding of how it might have sounded in Tolkien's mind. So I'll let him read just selections out of the story, and then we will come back and talk about it together. Good.
This is the Silmarillion. This is the copy which I was given for Christmas, 1977.
When it came out.
From my sister, who inscribed it with the little, she said, for Timothy, may your imagination always run a little bit wild. We had on our recent trip to Italy in 2023, we spent some time in Rome, and they had a Tolkien exhibition there. And I learned very little about Tolkien from this Italian exhibition about uh, about Tolkien, other than they're equally fascinated. But I did pick up one little detail, in that Tolkien spent time in Italy and learned Italian. He didn't like French. He didn't speak French. He never got along with French, but Italian he liked. And the pronunciations and the kind of the sound of the language of the elves, which you see reflected in some of the strange names, has a kind of, I see it as a kind of a hybrid of Old Norse and Italian. And so you might hear a little bit of that in my attempts to pronounce it.
And Tim, I forgot to, I think I didn't mark on the story what the excerpts were, so you might have to just let people
Okay.
where you're headed there.
So we're starting on we'll be reading like the first page and a half, and then we'll skip ahead to different parts, but we'll start at the beginning. Ainulindale, the music of the Ainur. There was Eru, the one, who in Arda is called Iluvatar, and he made the first Ainur, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his thought. And they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music. And they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvatar from which he came. And in the understanding of their brethren, they grew but slowly. Yet, ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all the Ainur and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. Then Iluvatar said to them, of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes, and pipes and trumpets, and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Iluvatar to a great music. And a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies, woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the heights. And the places of the dwelling of Iluvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall made before Iluvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Iluvatar at the end of days. Then the themes of Iluvatar shall be played aright and take being in the moment of their making utterance. For all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Iluvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. But now Iluvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Iluvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. So now we skip down to the last paragraph on that page. Then Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled. He lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme. And it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar, and contended with it. And again there was a war of sound, more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand. Behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. For it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies. But it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. Now we'll skip ahead to page 18 at the middle of the page. Now the children of Iluvatar are elves and men, the firstborn and the followers. And amid all the splendors of the world, its vast halls and spaces, and its wheeling fires, Iluvatar chose a place for their habitation, in the deeps of time, and in the midst of the innumerable stars. And skipping down. But when the Ainur had beheld this habitation in a vision, and had seen the children of Iluvatar arise therein, then many of the most mighty among them bent all their thought and their desire towards that place. And of these Melkor was the chief, even as he was in the beginning the greatest of the Ainur who took part in the music. And skipping down one more sentence. But he desired rather to subdue to his will both elves and men, envying the gifts with which Iluvatar promised to endow them. And he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called Lord, and to be a master over other wills. But the other Ainur looked upon this habitation, set within the vast spaces of the world, which the elves call Arda, the earth, and their hearts rejoiced in light, and their eyes, beholding many colors, were filled with gladness. Moving down to the middle of the next paragraph. Of the fabric of earth had Aule thought, to whom Iluvatar had given skill and knowledge scarce less than to Melkor. But the delight and pride of Aule is in the deed of making, and in the thing made, and neither in possession nor in his own mastery. Wherefore he gives and hoards not, and is free from care, passing ever on to some new work. And we're going to now go to the last page, 22, middle of the last paragraph. Yet it is told among the Eldar that the Valar endeavored ever, in despite of Melkor, to rule the earth and to prepare it for the coming of the firstborn. And they built lands, and Melkor destroyed them. Valleys they delved, and Melkor raised them up. Mountains they carved, and Melkor threw them down. Seas they hollowed, and Melkor spilled them. And naught might have peace or come to lasting growth, for as surely as the Valar began a labor, so would Melkor undo it or corrupt it. And yet their labor was not all in vain. And though nowhere and in no work was their will and purpose wholly fulfilled, and all things were in hue and shape other than the Valar had first intended, slowly, nonetheless, the earth was fashioned and made firm. And thus was the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar established at the last in the deeps of time and amidst the innumerable stars.
Thank you, Tim. You got all those names. I'm sure I would have mixed them up. So that's really good. All right. So I thought just to start with, I wanted to hear from some of you if you've read other works by Tolkien, perhaps, and what they meant to you. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Tell me what they meant to you.
Well, good story for one thing. I mean, I've probably read all of the Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings multiple times. So it's been part of my life since I was probably a boy. Good story. I mean, Tolkien manages to make story, history, and history story in a really interesting way. Like this Lord of the Rings has this massive history section in the back where they go into all the background of the story, and it's just fascinating to see how he's constructed this whole world and history.
Yeah,
I've seen some commentary, but like I see, I'm very good friends with C.S. Lewis, and Tolkien had this whole epic art, like epic arc of history developed, and Lewis is like, and Santa Claus came.
So you might agree with my professor who did the fantastic in literature, and he said he actually thought Tolkien was even a more masterful storyteller than C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. But yeah, and I mean, and like his sense of history and very much shaped by, I think, by his own experiences with war, and there's a lot of maybe depth to his work. Is apparently his son Christopher became his editor and archivist almost in a way, and the Silmarillion is a result of the work of Christopher Tolkien. The other, but is an interesting fact, there's actually a Canadian connection with the Silmarillion, is that a young man by the name of Guy Kay was hired by Christopher Tolkien as a research assistant, And he thought that Tolkien thought that his father's work was another history piece, and he was a little disappointed apparently that it turned out to be another story.
Yeah.
But Guy Kay, also known as Guy Gabriel Kay, became a very successful fantasy writer himself, and looks at how drawn on the legacy of,
Yeah. Yeah, my gut feeling was always that even though Tolkien said he wasn't directly referring to the world wars in his work, I always felt that was the backdrop. Yeah, and he had fought in the First World War, so yeah, that feeling. And he does create a whole world. That's the amazing part. I mean, even in novels, that's what we tend to look for as characters and the world they live in. And you can sort of suspend disbelief and enter that world. And Tolkien said, well, he said, it's like a secondary world. It's not the primary world. It's
He
not.
created a whole language.
But yeah, and a whole language, Elvish and
Multiple languages.
multiple. It's hard to imagine, but he said fantasy is imagination plus art. So it's the story and images and then the expression of it. And yeah, he creates a whole world out of that. So he thought that fantasy was the purest art because since it was in words, I don't know what he would have thought of the films that came later, but he thought because it was words, it left the reader the freedom to imagine as far as we would like and how we would like this secondary world.
I think when we watch the movies compared to the books, we know what he put up.
Okay. All right.
Horrible.
Is that your opinion too?
I found it fascinating as an adult who was studying linguistics to discover that Tolkien was actually a philologist. Like he came to his development of this epic fantasy, and it's not by, oh, I've got this great story, let's make up some languages to go in it. He actually worked at the other way. He started with the language, and then from that flowed the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can tell
that was his initial interest, was
the love of language.
And then the story kind of flowered around it.
And the history
But
of
that
language.
was his original, yeah.
Yeah, it is unusual. By comparison, C.S. Lewis, in his theory of fantasy, he said, I like his image though. He said, it's a little simpler. He said he starts with an image or a set of images, and then he said it's kind of like bubbling stuff, like a woman in a kitchen making jam. And so you've got this bubbling stuff. And he said, but you have to do something with it if you want to keep it or share it. So he said you have to find something like the jam jar or a form to put it in. So then a story. So I think Tolkien writes a little bit more in depth about that, but he also understands language. And they both say something like, fantasy isn't just saying there was a green sun. Okay, it's imaginary, but so what? What about the green sun? Is there a world in which a green sun makes sense? So you have to create a whole world for that.
Am I correct in remembering that the image that he saw for was the fawn carrying packages? I think that was that starting image for
for Lewis.
For the wardrobe.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. So anyway, this fantasy is as I said, a retelling of the creation story. And it does explain this mythical world of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. But I get a little lost, I have to confess, in, who are all these names as we're going along. So I thought, we'll start there. So maybe looking at page 15 in particular, 115, where's my story? Page 15. The first page. Who are the Ainur? Did you get a sense of who the Ainur is? It's Aina Lindale, the music of the Ainur, but who are the Ainur?
In our world, we probably call them angels or archangels.
Yeah.
We might also call them the powers.
The powers, yeah.
Because they represent like air, earth, fire and
Okay.
water.
Yeah.
Already gods.
Yeah, yeah, with a small g gods, yeah.
Oh, gee, God. In Tolkien's world, it's clear if you follow the path along that Gandalf and the other wizards are actually Ainur. They're
They're minor ones.
they're minor Ainur. They're
Minor?
Wow. They sing the minor key. They, I mean, it's fairly clear that Sauron and Gandalf and the wizards are all from the Ainur. Sauron being one of the ones who would have followed Melkor in the Discord, and these would have been the ones who volunteered to join the fight against that.
And if we think about, like a biblical perspective, yeah, to think of them as angelic powers or powers of the world, in this sense, they are, I mean, in this story, they are mythical powers, but also there is a kind of partial truth there that there are things like archangels mentioned. I had to look it up, but Jude 9, verse 9 talks about Michael, and we think about him as an archangel. So there's something about this that's a little mysterious, I think, to us, but is biblical in that sense. So angelic powers or archangels is a good way of thinking of them. And then we have the children of Iluvatar. Maybe an easier question is, who's Iluvatar? God. Okay, that one I remember. The creator God, one God.
May we pause just a moment back to the Ainur?
Oh, sure.
They are musicians.
That's a good point.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And they were very skillful, and they were singing the glory and the praises of all the beauty that had been created around them. I think that's very much very similar to what happened in the creation of the universe, of the angelic world, and then later the universe that in Job or mentioned.
Yes, yeah, beginning of Job. Yeah, and even in Revelation. Yeah, we have
and
praising God.
I love that he starts with music.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it is such an important part of everything that belongs, that fits. I remember when I first heard about string theory, and the thought that went through my mind, I don't have any thoughts about whether it's a real hard science or not, but the thought that I found so attractive about it was the vibrating strings, the universe being created of sound, and then right away my mind went to music, almost like God sang. He's not like he said, but let there be, but it's almost like he sang.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that reflected here.
Yeah, that brings out a lot of that beauty of creation. And to me, even the metaphysical poets, we were looking at that idea of the order of the universe being like the music of the spheres that God set in motion and continues.
Like I mentioned last week, there's Tolkien's friend Lewis did something similar with this creation of Aslan singing.
Good point. Yeah, Aslan. Yeah, I like that image too. So hold that thought about the music, and we'll keep it going as we discuss it. But who are the children of Iluvatar? Just to come back to that for a moment. I was giving you places to look in the story, just to keep us remembering. Page 18.
I'm a bit surprised by who wasn't mentioned with the father.
Yeah, they don't come into this, do they? We have men and elves.
Yeah, you have men and elves. What you don't have, and this gets covered later in the Silmarillion, is dwarves. who are actually, and Tolkien's work, they were created by one of the other Einer as sort of his own anxiety to see the children of Ilúvatar come into being.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how the story gets told further on.
Gets,
Like Abraham, part of everything in the world.
he gets in trouble for that though.
He does get, he gets told his dwarves will have to get put to sleep and
Yeah.
wait until the real thing arrives.
Oh, that's funny.
But then they're allowed to live because
But then
God
they're
says,
allowed
well, they resisted being done away with, so they were living things. So God in his grace let them go in the story.
The hobbits.
The Ilúvatar.
in-
How much will fit?
Well, there's really no explanation for the hobbits in Tolkien's grand mythology. They just show up.
Which is very funny.
And I'm glad they do. So then let's go on to number 4. Who is Melkor? Sometimes I think Melkor gets a bit too much ink, but who is Melkor in the story?
Sounds like Lucifer to me.
Yeah, and why does that ring a bell for you?
Well, because he was exalted in pantheon's the wrong word, but in the what's the word you're looking for? You see, in God's
Hierarchy.
hierarchy, he's up there, and Lucifer was, the son of light or whatever, and then he fell so far.
Yeah, so a fallen angel, but had been the chief of angels. And here he's called the chief of the Ainur, I believe.
Brenda, I just want to observe that the Einer, well, all the other beings that are listed, it's interesting, they all have choice. They have the ability to make decisions. That's one observation, and so Melkor is an example of one who chooses something to do. The other thing is that you sense that all of them are limited. They're still learning things about this, they're developing this. So that's just seems to be a unique feature of both the Einer, and then of course other ones maybe are even more limited, or their sphere of influence or their sphere of where they live and exist and what they do is different from the other beings that are mentioned. So
Yeah, I
there's
think,
both variety, there's limitation, and there's choice.
and yeah, some kind of free will involved. And I think that's a really good point about they're limited because they are creatures. They're not the creator. They may be in Tolkien's world kind of co-creators in a way, but they're not the creator. They don't have the whole understanding. I think in the story it says they only know the part of the creator's mind that they were created out of. But yeah, so only Ilúvatar is the one that is all powerful. Yeah.
In line with what Henry just said, they were created free right from the start.
Yeah, that's
They had
interesting.
wills of their own,
Yeah.
independently, not autonomously, or well, it's not mentioned, but freely they could make these kinds of
Yeah.
consequential decisions.
Yeah, free to act, free to
that was-
participate
yeah,
in ongoing creation.
That was inherent in their creation.
And it's something that all the children of Ilúvatar share, even human beings. They're still participating. You had an interesting point about that, the ongoingness of creation.
Yeah, I mean, creation is never completed in this story. It's always, well, there's 2 parts. There's the singing, which is it's actually referred to in here as a kind of a foretelling and a foreshowing of what's going to happen. So and then creation actually begins, and it's the unfolding of the music that's already been sung. So there's a kind of a 2-stage conception of creation in this story.
Composition comes first, and then it's
And then
it's the performance of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that'd be a good way.
Yeah, I noticed that.
When I read this before, this, they do this song, they're all there sort of as a choir kind of,
Yeah.
but they all kind of later, as the rest of the song,
Yeah.
they sort of perform the song in action. They sing the song, and it's sort of what you said, this foretelling and foregoing what's happened, and this discord. But Melkor at that time is just singing and causing discord. But then later, it shows him actually in there doing
Yeah.
discord in physical way.
That's right. And there's a moment where the Ainur have a choice. They can either stay in the realm with Ilúvatar, or they can enter into creation. And those who go to enter creation are who are called the Valar. So Melkor joins them in that enterprise of entering into time and seeing how the unfolding of history goes and participating in it.
They go from being the narrators to being the actors.
That exactly, yeah.
Or that or like from the Greek chorus commenting on.
But there's a little line in here that Brenda was talking about, we were talking about, and it was about, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it talks about the sharp needle of time. And is it in here, or did I read that somewhere
No,
else?
you did, and I thought I put a star beside it, now I
I
can't.
started reading other parts of the Silmarillion, and I got
What
lost.
does she mean by that? Sharp needle.
Well, that's sorry, I wish I had it at my fingertips.
Maybe I'll spot it.
But I did want to say something else that I appreciate about the story as he tells it, is that you have the great and the mighty who are unfolding they're actually creating the fabric of the universe and the outline of history. But in the mind of Ilúvatar, the small and the weak are equally important.
Yep.
And this is something that's a theme throughout Tolkien's writings. We see it in The Hobbit, and we see it again in Lord of the Rings with the action of the hobbits. But you have it here when the third theme of music is revealed. He says, "For it seemed at first soft and sweet." Something just like a little tune in the side. And a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melody.
Yeah.
And that's the birth of the elves and the men, who seem like, so they're small, they're limited, they're even more limited than any of the weakest of the Ainur. But it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power. And I think that's
Page 16.
I love the way that Tolkien validates even the smallest life.
Yeah, it elevates it.
Yes.
It makes the accidental toddler that Bilbo
Right.
critical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's right here in the
we have
structure of
significance,
his
even if
creation story.
we are limited.
The smallness and the fact that Ilúvatar is involved. It says in the beginning that he doesn't actually sing. Ilúvatar never sings. He talks to them, and he talks with these themes he wants them to do. And they do that.
Yeah.
And Ilúvatar, as you go into the Lord of the Rings, whatever, is never mentioned. Mentioned here, but he's hinted at on a few occasions. Like when Bilbo found the ring.
Yeah.
Gandalf says to Frodo, says, for whatever this means, you were meant to find it. Which is, I think, is sort of a casting back to Ilúvatar, even though he's this mighty being that nobody even thinks about, nobody knows exists really in his earth. Well, I'm just talking about hobbits, and most people don't. I mean, the world is. And Gandalf talks to Frodo saying that in some way, Bilbo was meant to find that ring. And it was like God is in sort of these, and not even Gandalf knows. He's like, in some way, and he doesn't even know how to explain it, you were meant to find that ring. He was meant to find that ring, and for you to get it, because this is a purpose that Ilúvatar, way back when he founded these things, had in his mind, perhaps.
Yeah, it's still the creator that initiates and has the great plan or design, and it's unfolding in creation. But yeah, he is the source, and he's the only one that's fully in control of it. So that I find is a biblical principle. We have that sense of creation, the doctrine of creation. We have a sense of the doctrine of the fall and melt, and even as a kind of tempter, like we have in Genesis and in
Okay, I found,
in the Gospels.
I found the thing.
We found you what you're looking for.
And it goes further to this point about the importance of small things. This, and it's on page 18, in the second sentence of the paragraph at the middle. And he says, and it's talking about the creation of the world, the earth, which seems such like a small part of the whole that's been created, this entire universe that's been sung into the being. And it says, and this habitation might seem a little thing to those who consider only the majesty of the Ainur, and not their terrible sharpness, as who should take the whole field of Arda, or the foundation of a pillar, and so raise it until the cone of its summit were more bitter than a needle, or who consider only the immeasurable vastness of the world, which still the Ainur are shaping, and not the minute precision to which they shape all things therein. It's just that in the smallest of things, it's the bitter sharpness of the needle of creation. It's the thing where things matter, brings it to a point.
Mm-hmm.
And the earth and what happens on earth are the bitter needle, the bitter point of history, where everything comes to a culmination.
There's another reference there that I was just looking at that was interesting because it hints at both the consequentialness of the decisions the Einar make, but also hints at the whole Christian concept of incarnation. It's in the middle of page 20. But this condition that are made, or it is the necessity of their love, that their power should thenceforward be contained and bounded in the world, to be within it forever, until it is complete, so that they are its life and it is theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that sense of, okay, for love, you're going to enter into this world, but by entering into it, you're giving up something else, and you're bound now for the life of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go back to that idea of like the themes?
Yeah.
Overarching.
Yeah.
On page 17, Melkor has kind of interrupted the theme a few times already with his own music.
Right.
So there's kind of like him wanting to do his own thing,
Yes.
when instead of like conforming to this pattern that Iluvatar had set out. And then what Iluvatar does is set up another theme, and Melkor's theme tries to interrupt it. But page 17 is talking about how it is saying to drown out the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. Yes. So it's like there's still something good or positive that's coming out of this.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Yeah.
This not great thing that's happened. And
yeah. I love that. Yeah, I love that, Tiffany. And I think that's really important. And it comes out in the bottom of 16 too. I was thinking about what is the third theme, because to come back to the music, which seems to be central, it seems the Iluvatar starts this great theme, right? And then there's the second theme, and then that seems to be according to his purpose, and he incorporates, the children of Iluvatar. But then in the last paragraph, we have after Melkor creates the discord in the middle of page 16, we have then Iluvatar arose, and the Einar perceived that he smiled. He's not disturbed. This is not a world of dualism where, and I think this comes back to Henry's point, where, it's good and evil are equal forces that act on the creation and the human world. No, that's not the case. Iluvatar still, it has he lifted his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm. And then it says, if you go down to about the middle of that paragraph, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. So it might not have been the initial design or plan, but to come back to what you were reading, it incorporates it. So it was unlike the others. It seemed at first, what Tim was saying, is soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched. So Iluvatar's music cannot be overcome. There's no equal power here. God's incorporates somehow even the discord in creation.
And he brings that out very explicitly in the middle of 17. He says, "And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite.
Right.
For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful than when he himself hath not imagined."
Yeah.
I mean, he's very much making it clear that even the attempts to distort will be turned around and
Yeah, and there's an
remade.
example in the creation later where Melkor attempts to burn up the planet that they're trying to create, and all it does is create, he tries to like vaporize the oceans, but that's when clouds first are created, and they're beautiful. And then he tries to freeze the planet, and then snow is created, and it's and so everything he does to destroy turns into something that's even more interesting and beautiful.
I feel like there are parallels to that from Annabelle's class and what
Yes.
was talking about in Annabelle's class, which is kind of like there's more to it than just what we see right here. There's this end that we're coming to.
Yes,
Greater purpose.
God works all things together
Yeah.
for good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that fit? Have I understood you? I'm not sure. Okay.
I think, yeah, it goes back to that idea in Romans.
This is so lovely. We see here Iluvatar's sovereignty over the entirety of the creation, and for us, it's a really lovely allusion to God's sovereign creation. I found it a bit disturbing that Iluvatar wasn't singing along with the Ainur, but I think it would be fair to say that he is singing through them, through everything that happens, everything that flows. He is active and an active participant through the actual exercise of the free will of his creation, of all the creatures.
And that's the mystery, isn't it? That God is the source and all powerful, but somehow in his grace, he allows that creativity and that participation by his creatures to be involved. So I was coming back then to number 5 and the music. I think we've been talking about what the music and the discord represent, but what is that third theme of the great music? Maybe a redemption theme? That Tiffany started with on top of 17, those notes were taken and woven into a solemn pattern. So maybe that overall purpose of redemption and new heaven and new earth.
See that there is a plan, ultimate purpose.
I mean, if you think about this as Tolkien's universe, where does that universe sort of come to its conclusion? And it comes to its conclusion with a little known hobbit, sacrificing everything to destroy the one ring of power, right? Like that's pretty close to the end of the story, and you can see like hints of how that might be playing out in that theme.
But too, it's not even the Hobbit who does it.
No,
It's
in
not
the end,
Gollum,
it's
right?
Gollum.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the humblest and most even despicable creatures in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fallen for sure.
I don't think he does it on purpose, though, does he?
Yeah.
No. I mean,
No.
function is,
But there's a greater
Yeah.
plan at work somehow.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking, what insight, if anything, does this story give us into, say, Genesis and maybe even John 1, or even Revelation, which would be about the new creation and the new heaven and new earth? Any thoughts on any insights that are connections you make between the story and those passages?
As much as he despised allegory, which he did.
Yes.
hated allegory,
Yeah, he didn't want allegory.
And he would say, this is not connected. He was all, you could obviously feel, he was a strong Catholic,
Mhm.
Catholic,
Mhm.
not just a Christian, a Catholic Christian. You can see obviously there was obviously influenced, not simply by his Catholicism, also by the First World War and his horrific experience of the Somme, where he fought.
Yeah.
And the losing so many friends. That comes up in here, not as allegory or as, oh, that's him retelling the story, but it impacts how he sees the universe, how he sees life and meaning and purpose. And his Catholicism definitely, I think, can be seen in here, not as a one-to-one. This Iluvatar is not our God,
Mhm.
nothing like our God in many senses. This world is not like our world. And we didn't want to create that
No.
in a manner of speaking. So I just, it's interesting to see these impacts on his life come out in here as he talks about many times. Fantasy must have truth, otherwise it's dead.
Yeah.
You can't just make up something that has no connection to anything real. It has some kind of connection to his life.
Yeah. It
It
has
flows out of his own life.
some truths
Yeah.
in it, not all truths,
Yeah, it's
clearly.
not a one-to-one. It's not
And a
allegory.
worldview.
It's
Yeah.
like-
Yeah. Yeah.
Typology.
Biblical
Right.
worldview. I'd say there's some biblical worldview that's overall here, and but not allegory. Maybe I should explain what is allegory. Well, you were getting to that it's like in Pilgrim's Progress, where Christian is like us, and he falls into the slough of despond, like I often do, falling into despair or melancholy, and then gets picked up by evangelist or whoever. So there's a direct connection, right? A direct correspondence between something in the story and something in
Yes, Lewis does.
biblical or reality, right? Whereas here it's not always a direct connection. It's more suggestive or evocative, or there's some truth, but it's primarily story that we're just to enter into that world and enjoy it. But it can give us some insights. So do we get any insights into the creation or the redemption of the world as biblical principles, part of that worldview?
I wonder, when you think in terms of the biblical stories of Genesis or John, what we as humans have so long interpreted them in a fairly sort of almost direct and practical way to try and understand them. And so, in one sense, we limit what is all involved there. No, it's almost like in our mind, we see God standing there almost like a human being, and now I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do that. Whereas this story would, I think, suggest that there's probably way more going on there than this simplistic reading that I might have Genesis 1, and I've been taught as an evangelical, this has happened this way, A, B, and C, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas he's kind of exploding that world and say, well, there could be lots more going on.
Yeah.
And much imaginative stuff and other ways to see this, understand it. It kind of broadens that idea, I think, rather than reduces it.
You're right. It gives me that sense of mystery and awe. I think of God's creation is just so much more complex and beautiful, and it has this great underlying theme that I often don't see. It's not as simple as you say as I might think.
We think in Christian tradition primarily of God as the creator, and you think you can see that in Genesis. Without him, nothing was made that has been made, right? It's God is the creator. What Tolkien suggests, and there's hints of it biblically, is that there's a good deal of co-creating going on, where others are also contributing in the creation. Created created beings who are themselves contributing in the work of creation. I don't know how that plays out biblically, or
I have
if
to say,
it's
but then your father-in-law actually has a very good way of putting it. It's not co-creator, but potentiating.
Oh,
So that potential, God created, and then out of that, humanity, that work for angels or with other beings, or can, and what, I think that's what you described, Luvatar as all of it is there, and these other beings that come out of his very being, he gives up himself and they contribute.
yeah. As I say, what I'm describing and co-creating is more Tolkien than biblical, but it's interesting to think how that, what the biblical aspects of that may be. I like your term of
Well, that's what I'm
potentiating.
saying.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
I feel like there's saying, first of all, that creation is much more complex and layered, and that there's mediated by in different ways. But that we're all, the basic message is you are created, and it's out of the will of somebody else. So our wills are derived from another will. And the other thing he's trying to do is deal with the mystery of free will and the mystery of evil.
Yeah.
And in a way that that doesn't, fall apart into dualism or, any of the other formulations that where people have gone astray.
Makes it too easy.
Yeah.
I would be loath to say that created beings are able to create in the same way that the creator created. He created out of nothing. And we
Yes.
create out of
Something.
everything.
Yeah. I was thinking about something I learned from reading essays by Tolkien and Lewis and others. Going back to Genesis 1, verse 27. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. So something about being in the image of God, which I can't fully explain, and writers don't fully explain, but there's something about creativity as part of that. Some of the poets we looked at would say, oh, reason separates us, say, from the animals, for example. But, and that's a reflection of God, and it is. But, it's not just, again, a one-to-one correspondence. There may be many layers to that. It's, there may be many ways in which we're created in the image of God, but creativity is one of them. And when we are creative, we express something of God's nature, but it's a reflection. And he's the ultimate creator, but it's kind of wonderful to think of as Tolkien puts it, that we're part of maybe as a sub-creation that's ongoing.
We see right here how great the imagination is for creating things that may not even have any actual substantial reality to them. And I think what I would say the height of our creative activity would be expressed in worship.
Worship, yeah. And that goes back to the idea of the heavenly beings worshiping God at creation, at the beginning of Job, at Revelation, the elders in the temple, they're all throwing their crowns down before God, worshiping the Creator. And that's the harmony of God's design.
And something we're about to begin formally in just a few moments. something that is so essential and vital to our being and our purpose for being. And how tragic and sad it is that so many people completely miss it.
I think you're right. And this is a biblical principle too, the idea of the telos. I think I've mentioned that before. It just means purpose. Why were we created? Um, Even in the Barbie movie, they were like, what was I created for? But, people wonder that. And that's a trivial example, but in all that we do and think, we are created to bring honor and to reflect the glory of God. And ultimately, that being created in his image, there's something about being reflecting God's glory. So where do people get this from? I'm looking at 1 Corinthians 10, the last verse, 31. Lots of writers do, including these ones, often quote this. It's from Paul's writing, and he says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. That's our ultimate purpose. So even Milton, I thought, was interesting because when he found he couldn't write any longer because of his blindness, he really struggled with what is my purpose then? Or I feel rendered useless. But it was to bring glory to God, to trust in him regardless. And that's,
Yeah, and
what it
like he
means.
wrote,
Yeah.
Paradise Lost, which was his stated intention was to justify the ways of God to man.
Yeah.
I think is what Tolkien is trying
Is kind of
is doing in some ways with this, well, not quite so didactic.
Yeah. It's not just to teach us a lesson, but it invites us in, right, to this world and to this thought and reflection. One thing I did connect to the I haven't gone to it, you can look at it later, but when I connected to the page with the questions, I put some of the highlights of one of Tolkien's essays on fantasy, which kind of lays out his idea of what fantasy is about. But one thing I really liked, he said, we as readers, so to bring it back to story, are partners in creativity and delight. And so I think that's kind of a lovely idea. We're all in the image of God. We're invited, even by this writer, Tolkien, to be partners in creativity and delight and even wonder. So, not that it provides all the answers, but it invites us in. Are we running out of time?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Brian. Brian's just joined us on Zoom.
Okay. Should I just close in prayer and we could continue talking if you like after that, but just for the sake of the recording. So I was thinking back to our hymn for departing, and I thought it has a nice connection. So I'll just pray through that and you can pray with me. Jesus, draw me ever nearer as I labor through the storm. You have called me to this passage, and I'll follow though I'm worn. May this journey bring a blessing. May I rise on wings of faith, and at the end of my heart's testing, with your likeness, let me wake. Becoming more like him.